Hi, BBs. Welcome back to Beauty and the Bitch. I'm Morgan.
And I'm Mick.
And today we are talking all things the Fellowship of the Ring.
I'm so excited, Morgie.
I am too.
So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much research did you do for this podcast?
6. But, how much life research did I do? A lot through my life.
Exactly. Okay, I think that's very fair to note about yourself. Because, fair enough, I also did not do maybe as much research as I could have done for this particular episode. But we literally have spent hundreds of hours talking about, thinking about, reading Lord of the Rings. So, I don't feel really very bad about it.
No, not at all. And I mean, Lord of the Rings has been such a big part of our lives collectively that it's only a matter of time before we get into it. Today, we're exclusively talking about Fellowship of the Ring. There will be mentions of the other ones, I'm sure, but we'll save those for future episodes. Why don't we start talking a little bit about the background for anybody who's not super familiar with the Lord of the Rings in general, especially the Fellowship of the Ring.
But before we give you the information, I do want to shame you a little bit because, well, I'm just saying, not you, Morgie, like anyone who doesn't know about Lord of the Rings.
Those yuppies.
I'm going to shame you later on in the podcast. But yeah, because this has been out since, it was published in 1954, correct? 54, 55. It's old as mess, and the books won 14 billion awards, so there's really no excuse not to know this series one way or the other.
Yes.
But that being said, if you don't, I'll find some way to continue loving you.
Of course. So the book was, in fact, released on July 29th, 1954. The second book followed the same year, which is kind of interesting, on November 11th, 1954. And the third and final installment, The Return of the King, premiered on October 20th, 1955. So that's pretty fucking old.
Yeah, though I will tell you, my mom was born in 1954, so if you ever hear this, Mom,
it's
I'm not
so young.
Super young.
It's maybe middle age, to say the most about that.
Sorry, Mom.
An interesting thing about the books is some of you may be familiar with The Hobbit, either through the movies that came out, which is another terrible discussion, or just because maybe it was your favorite book as a child, or something you read later in life, or something you're now putting on your to-read list because it is amazing. The Hobbit was originally intended to be a children's book, which I would say, yes, definitely. I read it as a child.
Yeah, I think I read it when I was 9 or something. It feels childlike.
Yes.
It's an adventure story.
It is a super adventure story and is completely appropriate for your children if you now have children or if you are a child at heart. The Lord of the Rings was originally requested / written to be a sequel to The Hobbit, which is a pretty intense sequel to what we just discussed as a children's story. It is pretty dark at times, pretty violent, pretty intense overall, and that's exactly what the publisher said when Tolkien presented it as the sequel to The Hobbit.
You know what's notable, though, I think, is it is more, certainly 100% more adult than The Hobbit. I don't think anyone could argue that it isn't. But in a way, it's almost like, we were talking about Harry Potter in the last podcast. There's no sex. Right?
No. I believe there's occasional innuendos or they just talk about women as being beautiful.
But there's no dirty fisting action.
Definitely not. No. Okay. Only in the fanfic.
Yeah. And then there's way too much.
Aragorn and Legolas.
What about Gimli? Don't forget Gimli.
He's
got fists like summer hams, girl.
What was it he said about the dwarf woman? He was telling Eowyn that people thought they didn't exist because they also had beards.
Yeah, exactly.
So Gimli can do whatever he wants. No shade from me, for sure. But I can't imagine there's a lot of sex fanfic out there about Gimli. Unless you're writing that and submit that to us, dear readers.
Oh my God, please do. We will read Gimli
100%
fiction. We will get into that. 100%.
Not a problem. So anyways, The Lord of the Rings was presented as the sequel to the children's book. The publishers were like, okay, girl, because he presented what is now 3 books as one large volume, The Lord of the Rings, and they were like, we're gonna need to split that up. So Tolkien, I don't know if you know this, Mick, originally suggested splitting it up into 6 different books, which they eventually obviously narrowed down into 3 novels.
No, I didn't know that. Makes sense, though. I mean, I know in Europe, often they split, like in Germany, for example, they split books that are just one here into 2 or 3 books.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it seems to be kind of like a publishing standard there or something.
Oh, that's
Smaller
interesting. The Fellowship of the Ring was 2 stories, originally to be called The First Journey, or The Ring Sets Out. And the name of the second book was The Journey of the 9 Companions, or The Ring Goes South. He gave him a little options there. Those were what he originally envisioned the books being called. And he famously had a problem with the title The Return of the King because he thought it was a spoiler. Which it totally is. I mean, there's really no like, oh, is Aragorn gonna make it? Because like, the king returns.
Well, I don't know. I don't really think of that as a spoiler because Return of the King where, right? Does that mean he returns to the throne, or does that mean he returns to like the land he came from? Or maybe he's not really the king at all, and we find out that someone else is the king, and that guy or girl returns.
It's Faramir.
Oh, I wish.
He's
Daisy.
so sweet. Daisy.
Oh, sit on my face.
Faramir is a lovely boy. Also, the alternate title for the Return of the King that he wanted was The War of the Ring, which I think is it's a pretty strong title, and it does encompass what the entire book is essentially about, but I just can't imagine it being called anything besides The Return of the King, even if it is a little bit of a spoiler.
I kind of like The War of the Ring. I'm kind of into it.
It's kind of intense. I mean, it is what they're building to. It is a war of the ring.
That's what it's all about, girl.
Maybe they were just tired of hearing the word rings and they were like, no, girl.
No more rings. No nose rings. No vaginal piercings. No wedding rings.
Not the wedding rings.
No ring of daisies. Nothing.
Speaking of wedding rings, Tolkien had this lover, right, in his youth, and he loved her so much, but she was Protestant, and his family did not approve of her, so they forbade him from speaking with her at all. Like, he couldn't talk to her at all until he was 21, which is like a weird age, but whatever. Maybe that's when they considered you an adult back then. And they threatened to take away his funding for school, to like send him away if he like spoke to her at all. So he like cut her off completely. And then on his 21st birthday, he wrote her a letter, and he hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, and said, I never stopped loving you. I still love you. Will you marry me? Aww. And she was already engaged to somebody else. Her name is Edith. Sorry, forgot to say that. Tolkien's future wife. And it's such a sweet love story because he came to her after he sent the letter, and she felt so conflicted because she had already agreed to marry this other person, and I'm sure they were in love. I'm sure she had a love for him, but she never quit loving him. And so she ended up leaving him, which I read he was like pretty mad about, but like he got over it, no problem. And they were married like shortly later, a couple years later, I think. They spent like a few years engaged.
That is so adorable.
I know. And then the very next year after they got married, he got sent away to the World War I front, which is, as I understand it, a death sentence to almost everyone, because it was crazy. I mean, I can't even imagine. So they essentially assumed that he was like going off to die. So I can't even imagine how sad must that be. They spent all that time apart and they barely get to be together.
How many years were they together before he got sent off to World War I?
Now, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe they were engaged for a couple years, but they were only married for 1 year before he was sent away.
So like less than 5 years though.
Oh, for sure.
Oh
yes.
My gosh. Well, okay, spoiler, he survived.
He made it back. And he learned a lot. He took a lot away from his experiences in World War I that influenced this book and influenced a lot of his other writings and his perception on good versus evil, which is essentially the resounding theme of the entire series, good versus evil. Now, a lot of people like to say, and this has been put on him and he has rejected it, that The Lord of the Rings is an allegory for World War II, which he was not in. Of course, he was in World War I. And when he kept hearing about it, he famously spoke out and said, I see where you might say that, but like, no. he completely disagreed, which I think is interesting because there are easy ways to see Sauron as sort of a Hitler figure who created and corralled lesser like dum-dums into like doing his power.
Orcs, like random orcs.
Just like whatever.
I don't know though. You know what? I'm glad that Tolkien spoke out and debunked that, but I also think that would give Hitler too much credit, right? Because Sauron is he's essentially like a fallen angel or like a god of sorts. And Hitler was just a tiny little sweaty man with an ugly mustache and a lot of neuroticism and an understanding of how to play on public opinion and play on fear and hate. Does that sound familiar to anyone, by the way?
What? Yeah, modern day politics.
I'm going there. I went there.
Interesting.
I'm like Degrassi.
Oh, Drake. Drake was in Degrassi. He was in a wheelchair, but he made it out, and also he's a superstar.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Jimmy.
What are some other themes that you can point out or that resound with you from the Fellowship specifically?
Well, all of Tolkien's works are super complex, so I'm certain that no matter how many themes we listed, someone would be like, but girl, you forgot about the theme of water and oil.
Oh, for sure.
But some that were sort of leaping out to me, first, for sure, in the Fellowship is friendship. Obviously, that's what fellowship means,
exactly.
Right? And fellowship follows, right, sort of their meeting of each other and the growth of their friendship.
And the breaking up of their friendship.
Exactly, because fellowship ends with Frodo and Sam running off towards Mordor.
Yes.
Right? And everyone else either dead or lost or somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So friendship, for sure. The power of friendship. That is just introduced in this book, but it definitely is like a huge through line. One of my favorite kind of themes is this sort of confrontation or end of hiding that is necessary, right? Because Bilbo has had the One Ring. Like, that's what happens in The Hobbit, right? In case you haven't read it. A lot of shit happens, but Bilbo finds the One Ring.
And Bilbo is Frodo's uncle, but adopted father.
Exactly. Yes. And he's old as shit now. It's his
111th
birthday. And that's when he sort of disappears with the ring, which is different in the movies and in the books, right? Because in the movies, right away, Frodo gets the ring.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. To be fair, they had a lot of ground to cover. I didn't mind that change personally, but yes, in the book, it's a much longer time, the beginning.
Yeah, like 30 years or something.
I thought it was like 50. I haven't read it in a minute, but yeah. Yes.
Like Frodo's like old. He's not like a cute little Elijah Wood, beautiful big-eyed boy. He's like a grown-ass hobbit man.
He is, yeah. Still very small, though.
Still very small. He is.
So small.
But anyway, so the point is, either way you look at it, they've been sitting on this big secret of the ring for a long time, right? And no one really knew that it was the ring, but it was there. And Bilbo was becoming addicted to it this entire time, which is one of the like horrible powers of the ring. So this idea of like, okay, we can't hide this anymore. The time has come for confrontation and for courage is a big, I think, theme that resonates with me.
Yes. It's interesting that you said addicted to the ring, because one of the themes that I think is really strong is addiction. Essentially, the ring could be some kind of allegory for drugs in general, because it affects everyone in a different way. But what is sort of the one essential about it is that if you hold on to it, to that power, you don't want to let it go and you would do anything to keep it, which is really interesting because Gandalf and Aragorn both are, and Legolas for that matter, are all less affected by it than men. The men and the hobbits and other, not like lesser beings, but those kind of people are more entrenched by it. They can't get away from it, especially as seen through Boromir, which I'm sure we'll get to, who is a human. He got addicted to the ring by proxy, and he wanted to do anything to get it, and he was willing to kill to get that ring.
Oh, yeah, to kill tiny little Frodo, who's never hurt anyone. He's just a real sweetheart.
So sad.
Until the ring gets to him later on.
Yes, It takes time, but he does get there. But I think it's interesting how it doesn't affect Aragorn in the same sort of way, but he is scared of it. They all understand the power, and they don't want to be a part of it because they know that if they get a piece of it, they'll never let it go.
Exactly. And one of my favorite scenes from the movies is when Frodo, at the very near the beginning, is like, "Oh my God, Gandalf, take this ring, please take it."
Yes.
And Gandalf is like, "Oh,
yeah,
no, like I can't do it." I think it's a really powerful scene because it shows that he has the wisdom to realize that even though he is more than a mortal man, eventually the ring would destroy him as well, and he would become addicted to it, and it would make him into a monster.
Yes.
Can you imagine evil Gandalf? Oh my God.
Galadriel had a similar moment, even a little more intense, much more intense than Gandalf's, where she pretty much tested herself because she knew she shouldn't take the ring, but when it was offered to her, she essentially was like, okay, this is happening and I have like two choices. There are two doors and I have to pick one to walk through. And she was proud of herself. And then she sort of burdened Frodo with oh my God, thank God I don't have to hold that ring.
Right.
That would be terrible. You're gonna die. It's never gonna work out. You're never going home. I mean, it was kind of rude.
That is such a capital C cunty moment. Do you remember the exact quote? "I will be beautiful and terrible."
Yes, and she gets all like she goes into a dark place. Yeah. Anyway. And she passed, and then Frodo has to walk, and then she's just like, "Bye, Felicia."
Yeah.
I mean,
Must be hard, girl.
And I love Galadriel, but what a bitch. And then she's just like, "So sorry. Here's your quest. You're gonna go that way. Here's like a couple of things, a little bottle of light for you, a little rope for your friend.
Here, take some bread."
Which like looks disgusting.
Yeah,
it looks like a dry graham cracker.
Yeah, it looks not at all cute. Okay, we're getting so off topic. We're skipping ahead we're like at the end of the series already.
Anywho, I have one other theme that I think is really important, and that's self-sacrifice. Because essentially Frodo is walking away from everything he's ever known, everything he's ever loved. He's willing to leave without anyone, was going to go by himself before his friends joined him. And that's a huge sacrifice. And at some point towards the end of the Fellowship, he realizes that's it. Like, he has sacrificed everything. He's not coming back. And this is what his life is. And his only purpose is to get this ring to Mordor and then die, essentially. There are a lot of other characters that do self-sacrifice. I think seen most evidently, in my opinion, in Sam, which follows along the friendship theme. He is self-sacrificing himself to Frodo for Frodo's mission. It's not even his own mission. He is only there as support to help him, to ensure that he gets his tasks done. And as positive as he stays through it, there's a lot of self-sacrifice that happens in there. In the movies, he loves Rosie. You see him pining for her just like moments before he sets out on his journey. And then when he's in Rivendell talking about going home, and then him sacrificing that chance to go home to move forward with Frodo is really touching. I think Sam is such a touching character.
Yeah,
and he's Sam. Also touching Frodo.
Oh, there's some a little homosexual going on. Maybe just a little repressed. I mean, I don't know if they ever act on it, but maybe when they were both like 14, you know.
Definitely in some fan fiction out there.
Oh, I know.
I have not read it, but now I'm probably gonna Google that.
Yeah, we should check that
for
out
sure.
At some point in our lives. Just be a fun friendship thing to do is read that together. But,
indeed.
Though, I wonder, how in The Hobbit, Bilbo, when he sets off on his adventure, it's essentially adventure for the sake of adventure, right?
Yes.
And Gandalf essentially forces him along with the dwarves. But I wonder if Frodo doesn't have some of that sort of wanderlust as well. Because he does sacrifice everything. And you're right, he does. Even if he doesn't physically die, by the end of the series, when he comes back, spoiler alert, too late, he's a different person. He's different. And he only sticks around for a while before he leaves for the Grey Haven. So he does die. It's definitely like a hero's journey. But I wonder if there isn't some part of him that was like made for that. You know what I mean?
I think Bilbo was, definitely. And how can you live with Bilbo and hear his amazing stories and not wonder what that would be like? I will say, though, for Bilbo's journey, he never had this sense of doom. I mean, there were times, but he never set out with the sense of, okay, I do this thing and then I die. He always intended to return.
Absolutely.
And Frodo, his resolve was broken.
Yeah. Pretty
early on. As much as Sam tried to keep it alive. Sam was the one who really kept Frodo going in so many ways. But it's just, even if there is adventure in there, there's also sacrifice.
You're totally right.
I also really like the sacrifice exemplified through Arwen, one of the only female characters to make an appearance in The Lord of the Rings, and a beautiful character. I love Arwen.
Though cooler in the movies than she is in the books, I think.
She's an elf, so there's a certain sense of like boring.
Yeah. They're a little too perfect.
Yes, I agree. But she did sacrifice a lot to be with Aragorn, and sacrificing for love is harder to do than it looks, especially when you have to go against other people that you love.
Because you have to sacrifice. Okay, well, should we explain what she... Maybe we should
yes.
explain that real fast.
For those of you who don't know anything about Arwen, once again, shame on you, but Arwen is an elf, and she's not just any old elf. She is the daughter of Lord Elrond, who is the head of the king of Rivendell. He is the head honcho. She's his daughter, and elves are blessed with immortality and many other gifts that they can share with humans and do sometimes. They had been known in the past to have relations with humans as far as working together in the original battle against Sauron. Their ties have kind of broken a little bit. They're not in such good graces with the humans. They don't get along. But Arwen has Aragorn, and they are essentially based on these other characters from A Lost Tale, Beren and Luthien, which is essentially based on J.R.R. Tolkien and his wife and the love they had for each other. And so they're really special characters. And she essentially wants to give up her immortality, her chance to move on with her family when they go to the Grey Havens, to be with Aragorn. And her family does not approve.
No, well, because for one thing, to sacrifice, to stay in Middle-earth, to be with her man, she has to sacrifice all of her familial love. In fact, she has to sacrifice all the love she has for her race. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, she's literally the only elf left there.
All of the elves are leaving. The time of the elves is over, as they would say.
So they're all out of there, and it's just her staying behind. And no matter how impressive Aragorn is, he is mortal. He dies eventually, and then we see it in the movies, but I think it's also, is it in the appendices of the books? They talk about, like, she, like, wears a veil and walks alone through the woods and is, like, the most alone person ever. I kind of wonder, girl, was that worth it?
It is.
I really wonder.
It is very sad. And that's a great question. Is it worth it? But once you've made the sacrifice, it's hard to go back. And I think I said Arwen sacrifices her immortality, but in fact, she does live on. And Aragorn, while blessed with long life, as he is one of the last of the Numenor, he's a descendant of this essentially altered race of man that has extended life, but they won't live forever.
So what do you think? He lives like 120 years, 140 years?
In the hundreds for sure. Because I believe at some point he tells Eowyn or someone else that he's like 95 or something. And he lives for much longer after this.
True. Yeah, it's like, let's say like 300 years.
He's like a couple hundred for sure.
But she's going to live like for thousands of years. Correct?
Yes, and that's so depressing. Yeah. And what happens to their children? What's the deal with their lifespan?
I don't know. You would think they would. Where are her kids? Damn it.
Why
is she walking alone in the woods with a veil when she's got 14 kids that live for 500 years each? Children these days.
I wonder, they'll have it long, extended life, if nothing else.
Oh, for certainly. But between Numenor and Elvish blood, I bet they're also beautiful children.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
So, do you have any other self-sacrifice that you witness?
Well, there's sacrifice left and right. I mean, I feel like because Tolkien was a devout Catholic, sacrifice and guilt and sort of those religious themes, charity, are huge throughout the book.
Sure.
Something that I'm kind of stuck on, and it's connected to this idea of like the time of hiding is over that I was talking about earlier, but family skeletons and like the burden of family is, I think, a huge theme with almost every single character in the series. And I didn't know that about Tolkien not being able to talk to, what's her name? Edith.
I believe it was Edith.
And actually, I don't know if that was at all conscious or if that was as huge for him as it sounds to me, but this idea of like, we talk about Frodo, right? He didn't go find the ring. That was definitely Bilbo, but Frodo's the one who has to sacrifice for it.
Sure.
Right? We talk about Legolas. whose father plays a huge role in The Hobbit. But it's not the father that has to go. It's the youngest son who, like, hardly had any role in the business before, right? Or, like, Gimli, who's the son of Gloin, who literally went with... Gloin, right? I'm
Yes,
pretty sure it is.
yeah.
Who literally went with Bilbo to find the ring in the first place. And that's not even getting into Faramir and Boromir and their fucked up father.
That is a super burden. First of all, their dad is 100% the worst.
The worst character in the series to me. I hate him so much.
He's horrible.
He's awful. Yeah.
Unanimously.
That scene where he's eating the chicken and the tomatoes.
I think it's a tomato, but how is it so red? It must be one of those heirloom tomatoes.
Oh, girl. Well, he is rich. I do like his style. That big, like, fur black thing he wears when he's, like, running around the
What if they did, like, product placement in the Lord of the Rings movie? And he was legit eating, like, Peterson's Farm heirloom tomato. There's, like, a sticker on it. And Pippin, in the middle of a song, stopped to be like, that looks good.
He washed it down with a Pepsi.
And his cloak is like Urban Outfitters. It's like a tag hanging out.
Why didn't they ask us?
We should have been a part of this for sure.
So I do have one other kind of theme. I'm sorry, or did you have more on?
No,
on that?
go ahead.
Okay. It's just something that I've actually been thinking about recently in my own life, but thinking about Fellowship and rereading bits of it, I feel like small decisions can sometimes have unimaginably big consequences. And I think a big theme of this is sort of like big issues that interrupt small lives or small people who have to become embroiled in huge things, seemingly through happenstance, you know?
Yeah.
Like, the halflings are huge in the story of The One Ring, between Gollum, who used to be Smeagol, who was like a hobbit-like person, and then Frodo and Bilbo and Merry and Pippin. And these are like the most like adorable, frankly boring little people. All they want to do is like farm their little land and clean their house and hide their spoons from their like greedy cousins. And like they have such small, comfortable lives, and they end up being the most important players. I mean, everyone's necessary, but you legit couldn't do it without those hobbits.
No. And I love Hobbiton. And I think we've talked about before, if you have not read Lord of the Rings, I at least recommend taking a look at a map online before you watch the movie or something. The map is beautiful, first of all, and also it gives you context as to like where the hobbits live. They live in Hobbiton, they live in the Shire, they have this whole section versus other things on the map. Mordor borders on Gondor, which is a pretty scary place to live, and then you later find out that's Aragorn's heritage. That's where he came from. That's where Boromir and Faramir live, which makes you understand Boromir a little bit better, I think, because they have to literally live in the shadow of Mordor, and they have a lot of pressure weighing on them to keep their forces at bay, even before Sauron is resurrecting his power.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it very much Boromir, Faramir, and Denethor. I don't want to give him any more credit than he deserves. He really doesn't deserve much, but they are the ruling family of a war-torn country.
Yes.
You know? So if you imagine, you know, if you had grown up, oh Lord, in Syria right now, what would you be like? You know, like there would be pressures and you would be paranoid and you would be afraid and you would probably have some anger issues because you had lived through some awful tragedy and like atrocity, you know?
Yeah.
And they had too.
Indeed.
They had too. Do you remember, Morgie, that map that I painted on my bedroom wall in high school of Lord of the Rings?
So cute. And
it's a huge map.
Bringing it back to the episode 1 we did of The Magicians, Julia and Quentin painted on the underside of his dining room table the map of Fillory, which is so a thing you would do when you love a fantasy series.
Oh, 100%. But especially if it has like a beautiful map, which is so important to a fantasy series. I
am a sucker for a map. In fact, you just bought a book recently and you pulled out the entire cover of the book is a giant map, which is, I would just shut up and take my money. I will give it to you. I love it. It's so great.
It's such an amazing book. That book is about sea monsters, and I got it from the University of Chicago Press.
Nice.
And it folds out to be that huge map of like all the sea monsters that they would always draw on the maps, and because there were these like specific places where they would tend to draw like a sea serpent, or like they have all these ridiculous names I can't ever remember. But yeah, it's a fascinating book.
So The Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien's telling of this epic story sealed his place in history as essentially the modern father of high fantasy. Now, there was fantasy for sure before the Lord of the Rings, but the Lord of the Rings is the one thing that changed the game. Everything we have, we love, we know today comes from inspiration from the Lord of the Rings. Without the Lord of the Rings, like, can you imagine your life? It changed the course of history for fantasy and lovers of books and lovers of maps, because there is not an excellent fantasy story out there these days without a map attached to it.
Have to have the map.
Have to.
Well, and C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien were biffers for at least parts of their lives.
Yeah.
And between the two of them, the Chronicles of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings, no fantasy story that is coming out today can pretend that they don't owe them a debt.
Sure.
You see, especially like the ring wraiths, the 9 that like follow the fellowship and try to steal the ring back from them and perhaps kill them on the way. That like tall, shadowy, like skeletal figure with its black cape blowing in the wind. Now, I'm sure there were archetypes of that before Tolkien, but like that's in every fantasy story ever. If you've ever read The Wheel of Time, they're fucking all over that. Everywhere. The
Dementors, Harry Potter.
Fuck yes. Absolutely.
So much is influenced by it. And
so it's a masterwork, really.
Yes, and it's interesting that you brought up C.S. Lewis, because Tolkien, while he grew up religious, quickly became more of an atheist, I think. He didn't harbor religion as the safe place. And really, I think that's part of the writing that he did. It was this new place that he could create. And so much of his experiences were influenced, as we said, by his time in the war and other things that he saw, atrocities. And that's how he got these dark images and these sad tales and these long journeys. It came from his experiences, and his correspondence with C.S. Lewis, if you've ever read any of the letters between them, are very interesting. And their relationship in general is very interesting, because C.S. Lewis obviously was a very devout Christian, mostly. And in the Chronicles of Narnia, 100% Aslan is Jesus.
That is legit just an allegory.
And I was reading that there's a lot of different, not straight up allegories for Jesus in The Lord of the Rings, but there is a lot of sort of being reborn that happens, most prominently seen through Gandalf in the Fellowship of the Ring when he falls in Khazad-dûm and he battles with the Balrog, and then he is later reborn as Gandalf the White. That is probably the most, I mean, that's some Jesus shit.
I mean, yeah, yes and no, right? Because it's certainly some rebirth shit.
Yes.
But, I'm really not trying to be offensive to any Christians who might be listening, but Jesus was not the first deity to die and be reborn.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that happened to Persephone in Greek mythology. That happened to Orpheus. Achilles and Perseus and Hercules all went to the underworld, which is death to the Greeks, and came back up, right? Like, there are a lot of gods that died and were reborn. So, I mean, that's like a theme. Like, that's a really important theme of divinity. Tolkien, even if he wasn't practicing Catholic, he grew up, obviously, deeply Catholic. So I agree with you. Definitely, like, those allegories are...
But much more subtle than Aslan.
Yeah.
And other C.S. Lewis things.
I like to think that Tolkien just understood the power of, like, the Christ figure. Like, someone who sacrifices and dies and then is reborn somehow. Frodo, as opposed to Jesu Christe.
Frodo himself had a little bit of a Christ complex with carrying the burden of the ring literally up a hill. Yeah. So there was that.
And while he was like bleeding and everyone was trying to attack him and
very hard. But Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were friends, which is really just interesting from a standpoint of, like, how is it that famous people are always, like, great famous people are always just like, oh, yeah, we were just, like, randomly friends, and then, like, the creators of best fantasy that ever happened ever. And that shit happens with actors, too. Like, Ian McKellen, who is an amazing Gandalf, in real life, he's best friends with Patrick Stewart?
Yeah.
What?
They did... One of the regrets of my life, along with not seeing the original cast of Wicked on Broadway, is not seeing Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart in Waiting for Godot.
Yes, I'm sure it was beautiful.
I bet that was fucking astonishing.
They're so...
I love them.
Cute. Adore, like, friendship goals to the max.
Oh, 100%. I'll still love you when you're old and bald, Morgan.
Oh, thanks, baby.
You're welcome, baby.
I would not look attractive bald. Let us hope that that does not happen. Do you want to kind of just go over the sort of details of the story briefly from just start to finish?
Yeah, hopefully anyone listening hasn't been like the most lost of all time. But if you have, we're going to make it clear for you. So I guess we're just doing the fellowship though, right?
Yes,
not the
just
full,
the fellowship.
Not the full tamale. Okay, I'll give it a shot. Let's see here. So we already said it's Bilbo's 111th birthday. And you help me, Morgie.
Yes.
Okay, good. And he has a big party with all the hobbits. And at the end of that party, he disappears, which is what the One Ring does when you put it on. That's all that Bilbo knows happens. Frodo is like, holy shit, he's gone. Gandalf goes with Bilbo to Rivendell, correct?
Yes, Bilbo goes to Rivendell.
Yeah, I thought so. Anyway, so Bilbo wants to go write his story, whatever. Frodo in the book chills out for a bit, just lives his little life, whatever, smokes some weed.
Disclaimer. The hobbits love weed.
They do. Now, I've heard people say that it's just tobacco, but they call it weed, so that's what I'm going to call it, okay?
And even if it is intended to be tobacco, we do not accept that. That is not our perception of the hobbits. The hobbits, first of all, the hobbits are eternally hungry.
Yes.
They will eat, they have like
6 to 7
12 meals. Yes, they eat insane. All day. And my favorite example of this is seen through Merry and Pippin, who are both Frodo's cousins, and adorable little hobbits, and they're super best friends, like so precious, and they are so high all the time. I don't care about this tobacco thing. They're fucking high, and all they do is eat, and they go so far as to like steal crops and lie to other people about the food that they have and go out of their way to just like make sure they're getting theirs.
So if in fact it's true that Tolkien wasn't talking about marijuana, was just talking about tobacco, it is an awful funny coincidence that the two characters who love the tobacco, quote unquote, the most are always hungry.
They got the munchies.
And they're always like playing around and giggling. I don't know, man. It seems like an awful coincidence. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So Gandalf eventually comes back to the Shire, and he lets Frodo know that he has some worries about this ring that Bilbo had gotten in the Misty Mountains. And it comes out that, in fact, this is the One Ring. This is when Gandalf is like, nah, girl, can't take that ring. I'm already too powerful. That'd be a bad story. So they decide they're going to head to Rivendell, right? Gandalf and Frodo. And then Sam is listening in through the window because he's nosy and has a little crush on Frodo.
Like you do.
Who doesn't? And so Sam comes as well. Sam, I wanted to say earlier, talking about Sam's loyalty, have you ever considered, maybe I'm just barking up the wrong tree here, but Sam is also Frodo's servant, right?
He's his, like, gardener.
Yeah, so there's, like, I wonder if there aren't some themes of, like, socioeconomic, like, especially in England, things are kind of stratified there, and Frodo's like a lord essentially.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
Anyway, they all set off to Rivendell together. And then along the way, they run into Merry and Pippin, correct? Who have been stealing produce from Farmer Maggot? Farmer Maggot. How could I forget? We'll see. Have I forgotten anything so far, Morgie?
Did we mention that they were taking the ring?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They have the ring with them. Yeah, they didn't just leave the ring.
So Bilbo left the ring for Frodo, and they set out. Along the way, they pick up 2 companions, and they're just 4 adorable hobbits. And truly, none of them understand the depth of what they're doing.
No. Well, how could they so far?
Sure.
Really. It isn't until they first see the riders.
Yes.
Let's see. What are all the different names for the riders? They've got like 1,000 different names.
Oh,
the Nazgul.
The Ringwraiths.
The Ringwraiths. The Nine.
The Nine.
These are mortal kings who were essentially tricked by Sauron into becoming these like ghostly specter-like servants of his.
Eternal.
Yes, they're horrifying.
Yes, it's very scary.
And they they wear hideous clothes. That's not what I was going to say. They ride these horses that are not right. These horses.
Yeah, their eyes are like red.
Yeah, and they're always drooling.
Ugh, it's not good.
Just disgusting. Anyway, so the Ringwraiths are searching for the One Ring. That's their like main job in life, correct? Is to find the One Ring.
Yes, they're trying to reunite Sauron with his ring.
Yes, because you find out that Sauron's still powerful. He's like, you might think of him as like Satan. He is a fallen angel, but he he's really more than that. He's discordant, and he's malicious.
He's very much reminiscent of when Voldemort still is alive, but only barely, but also still incredibly powerful and has sway over these people that he previously had power over when he was whole. So that's definitely where that idea came from for J.K. Rowling.
Oh, absolutely. So Sauron's like the big bad anyway, and the Ringwraiths are some of his many minions. He has like a bajillion different minions.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
So they're on their way to Rivendell. They intend to meet up with Gandalf along the way, and Gandalf never shows up. But they do find, what's that town they went to?
Bree?
Yes, they went to Bree, and they've already been like scared shitless by these Ringwraiths that are after them. They know shit's real, and they run into a new character, one of the sexiest characters in the story, Strider.
Strider. He's got that long, stringy hair.
Oh, he's got it.
He saves their lives right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right off the
bat. That's how he do.
Strider, you later learn his name is Aragorn.
And you later learn he is son of Arathorn, heir to the throne of Gondor, the descendant of... What's the guy that originally took Sauron down? Isildur. He's Isildur's heir.
I'm glad you actually knew, because I was going to say something real stupid. Did you see me preparing my stupidity over here?
He's intense, though. And I feel like, whereas in other stories, people are like, yes, say all of my titles, tell them everything I am. Aragorn's like, no.
Yeah.
He's like, let's not talk about it. I'm kind of a big deal, but it's whatever.
Well, because he's been out in the wilderness for years and years. Just like, I think of him like trying to level up. Like when you play a video game, he's been out in the wilderness leveling up. Gathering herbs, making potions,
having sex with elves.
Fucking elves.
We're doing whatever.
Who wouldn't, you know? So in Bree, it's a town where human beings and hobbits kind of intermingle, but it's mostly humans, correct?
Yes.
And it's pretty dark, this little town. You know what we just did? Haven't we already skipped over Tom Bombadil?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I know you want to talk about that.
You know what? Let's return to Tom. There's a guy they meet in the woods
in the book.
Yes, in the book. He's not in the movies at all. We'll get back to him, because I think that's almost like a separate thing. He's left out of the movies and many adaptations because he's a strange character.
Yes.
But just know that happens. We'll get back to him. Anyway, they're in Bree. I think the gatekeeper or some asshole in Bree tells them out to the Ringwraiths. And Frodo accidentally slips the ring on his finger. Do you remember?
He would.
They're all dancing with their little hairy hobbit feet on the tables.
Yeah.
And
I love the songs they sing.
I mean, they're cute. They're
it's so cute.
Music is another big thing.
Yes.
Or at least it's a motif. It comes up constantly.
There are a lot of songs in the book. They just essentially look like poems, but there's a lot of songs, and they're a lot of them very good. In The Hobbit as well, lots of songs.
Absolutely. I love that one in The Hobbit that the dwarves sing about, like, caverns deep.
Yes.
When they're trying to get,
yes, Queen.
I used to sing that to myself as a child. I mean, it didn't sound anything like it did in the movies. But anyway, okay. So the Ringwraiths know they're in Bree, know they have the ring. Frodo accidentally slipped the ring on his finger, causing himself to go invisible, and everyone freaks out. And Aragorn tells them right off the bat, like, okay, well, you're not going to stay in your rooms. We're going to put, like, all these pillows in your bed so it looks like you're there, and we're going to go, like, across the street.
He's smart.
He's smart, yeah, because that night, the Ringwraiths sneak into their room and stab those little feather pillows absolutely to death. They run away from the Ringwraiths, and they're running through the wilderness. Frodo, once again, puts on the ring. Do you remember why he puts on the ring?
Because he's just a fucking idiot.
I thought he had a good reason. Maybe it was just temptation. Anyway, the Ringwraiths find him in that old sort of abandoned, like, tower area. It's special somehow. I forget how. Old shit.
Yeah. Oh, I forget too. But yes, and then they have a fire, and Aragorn is nowhere to be seen. He's out, like, doing whatever, and then Frodo has the ring on. He gets stabbed in this sort of ethereal ghost world, and then it's a mortal wound. He's going to die. Without the help of somebody greater. Strider comes back and saves them, and then they're now on this new side mission to, like, save Frodo's life, which is so great because then we get to meet Arwen in, like, one of the sweetest introductions ever.
Yes, but only in the movies.
Yes.
In the books, it's old Glorfindel.
Yeah, well, fuck that motherfucker.
I know. Who the fuck is he? He's like a useless elf lord. I'm so glad they made it Arwen.
Me too.
That makes her a much better character.
And she looks so gorgeous for her introduction.
Liv Tyler.
Ugh.
Liv Tyler?
Yes, Liv Tyler.
Okay. Yeah.
And so she takes Frodo to Rivendell, has some trouble along the way, but essentially they all get to Rivendell eventually. Frodo's life is saved, and we meet Lord Elrond.
No, he'll never be the same.
No, never. No.
Yes, we meet Lord Elrond, a.k.a. What's his
Hugo
name?
Weaving.
Mm-hmm. And in the Matrix,
Agent Smith.
Yes, horrifying.
Yeah, he's such an interesting person. And Lord Elrond calls this council of men and dwarves and elves and people from all around Middle-earth to come and let them know that, number one, the ring is still around and it has been found, and they have to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And essentially, they all kind of bicker about it, and everybody's kind of a dick because they all want it for themselves, which I guess I get, but also no, like, we've been here before. We know how this shit goes down.
Yeah, if you smoke that meth, you are going to get bad teeth, and there's no way around it.
No way around it.
Yeah, Gandalf told them.
And there's an interesting scene that transpires. It's a lovely scene, really, because it's where Frodo kind of makes the decision that this is his thing and he has to take care of it, which breaks Gandalf's heart. Very sad. And they form the Fellowship of the Ring. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun. And there are 9 people total in the Fellowship, which exactly mirrors the 9 ring wraiths. So that's kind of just like a nice little symmetry thing.
All right, Morty, can you name them all?
Yes.
Without cheating?
I can totally do it.
Okay, go for it.
We got Frodo Baggins.
Okay.
We got Samwise Gamgee. Mm-hmm. We got Pippin Peregrine Took.
Oh.
Also known as Pippin. Meriadoc Brandybuck. Mary. We got Aragorn. Mm-hmm. We got Legolas. Mm-hmm. We got Boromir. Mm-hmm. And we got Gimli. Mm-hmm. And we got Gandalf the Grey.
That's really impressive.
I'm a little partial, but I love me some Gandalf.
Oh my god, me too.
So they become this fellowship and they set out with the quest to take the ring to Mordor. Right? So they're all going out. They face some trials and tribulations, but essentially the first horrible thing they face is going through the mines of Moria. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
Try to go over first and then there's that big snowstorm.
Yes, which was set off by Saruman, who for some reason we haven't mentioned at all, but
he's not in these books yet. He's not in this book yet. Yeah.
Well, we'll just pepper him in. Saruman is a powerful wizard who Gandalf loved and respected until he found out actually Saruman's a total jackweed and is like totally working with Sauron because he just caved. He was just like, oh, you're back? All right, we'll never win. Yeah. He just like gave up. Which is like really stupid. Anyways, so Sauron.
We'll talk more about him in Two Towers.
Yes.
Podcast. He'll be a main character.
Sauron is just fucking people's shit up, and Saruman's helping him, and they have to go through the mines of Moria to avoid some bad weather and other things. Gimli's like, yeah, let's totally go through there. Everything's going to be great. I'm a dwarf. Shit is not great down there. There is nothing but death and despair. And they're faced with goblins. They're faced with other things. They're faced with Pippin knocking a bucket into a well in the movie. And Gandalf.
I think that might happen in the books too. Fucking Pippin.
He's
always fucking. I love him.
He's just curious.
But he's mischievous is what he is.
He is.
Makes a lot of trouble.
Yes. And then the worst thing ever that happens, which was so sad, Gandalf has to sacrifice himself in the mines of Moria to let them have the chance to escape. He battles with the Balrog.
So Balrog is a really interesting thing, right? Because Gandalf is like a fallen angel or like a deity of some sort as well. I don't mean fallen as in evil. I mean fallen as in came from another place and came to Middle-earth.
Yeah.
And the Balrog is like the evil version on the same level as him. So Gandalf is like a beast. But this Balrog, same level of beastliness. Epic. And some of my favorite moments in the entire series are in that like collection of 5 pages in the books.
Yeah.
You know? You Shall Not Pass.
Yes.
I mean, that is like iconic.
Oh, it's so in pop culture.
Fly, You Fools. Mm-hmm. Which, have you heard some people?
Yes.
Have you heard that theory? Do you want to explain that theory?
So there is a popular theory out there that I love, and like, could have some legitimacy, where Gandalf says to them right before he falls into Khazad-dûm, to darkness, to battle with the Balrog, he says, "Fly, you fools." And as you might famously know, if you've seen the third movie or read the books, the eagles come and save Frodo and Sam from Mount Doom and take them away and help. They help throughout the battles. So the theory is that Gandalf's suggestion to them was that they fly to Mordor.
Which would have been a fucking lot easier.
Would have cut out pretty much the next book completely, most of the third book. So perhaps had he said, "Eagles, you fools."
I know, yeah.
I mean, like, clarity is everything.
Yeah, he was hanging off a broken bridge at that point.
He was.
So I guess I forgive him, but it's so powerful.
So tragic. And then in the movie, it was masterfully recorded where the sound kind of goes away. You can't even hear them crying or screaming. You just hear the sounds of arrows coming in. Frodo, I think, crying a little. And then just outside when they make it out, just tears.
Yeah.
And
people
like
falling on boulders. And
they're
just
distraught. And then Legolas looking on with not understanding the emotion because he's an elf and also because he can't act very well.
I was going to say, that's the one face Orlando Bloom
yes,
can do. So
he's just like sad, but not sad, but also you're sad. But
I hate him.
It's a really powerful scene. And then, of course, Aragorn having to pull it together, saying, "We have to go, let's get this shit on the road." And that's essentially what they have to do through everything. You're going to lose people along the way and you have to move on.
But Gandalf, though, he was like the best of them. He was like the most powerful and the wisest and the magic user, and he started the whole thing.
It was really good, really sad. And at that point, they do move on, and really they just move on to more trouble because Saruman has sent his Uruk-hai out to kill these people, to like kill them. And they move along and they're gonna make camp, and Frodo wanders off like you do when you're the most important person and the only reason they're all on this journey. And Boromir goes and snaps and tries to take the ring from Frodo, and it's bad. It's really bad.
It's Boromir's, this goes back to all the things we were talking about before, but his big sort of argument is like Gondor has been fighting the orcs and Sauron and, you know, all the evil for hundreds of years. Like, if anyone deserves to have this weapon, it is us. Please don't destroy the only possible advantage we might have, which of course is the trap, right? Because you can't use the ring just uses you. So he falls into the trap 100%.
Yes, and this essentially sets in motion for Frodo what he knew he needed to do all along, which was go alone. He can't go with them. They're too affected by it. It's his burden to bear. And as he makes this decision and decides to escape, the Uruk-hai fall in on them, and this battle ensues, which ends with Boromir losing his life to save the other hobbits, which is so touching because he knows what he did wrong and he realizes it. And throughout the whole fellowship, he had opposition to Aragorn. He had mentioned several times that Gondor needs no king. He made it very clear they're not interested in having him back. And in his final moments, they have this beautiful connection, and it's very touching. And he didn't save the hobbits. The hobbits were kidnapped because the Uruk-hai think that one of them is Frodo, because Frodo stays out of sight.
All hobbits look alike to them.
Yes, any halfling will do. Yeah. So they take them and they leave, and then Boromir has this beautiful death scene, which I don't know if you know this about the actor who plays Boromir, Sean Bean. He is famous for like
getting killed,
dying, everything.
Same in Game of Thrones.
Yes,
right? Lord Stark.
Yeah,
right?
Eddard.
Stark.
So he dies. It's beautiful. They bury him at sea, and then cut back to Frodo and Sam. Frodo leaving and Sam being like, "Nah, girl, I'm coming with you."
Mr. Frodo.
And so they also have a very touching moment where, and I think I think this is what happens. I haven't watched it since like a couple weeks ago, but Sam several times throughout the series talks about how Gandalf said, "Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee." And he always says, "I don't mean to, Mr. Frodo." And it's so sweet. And they have a moment, and Sam almost drowns because like, why can you not swim?
I know, right?
It's not that hard. And they leave together. Aragorn and the others do not follow them, and they decide to go and save Merry and Pippin.
And that's the end of the Fellowship.
That's it.
Of the Ring.
Yes.
Not really the end of the Fellowship.
That is the end of the
Well,
Fellowship.
It's the end of the Fellowship, too, but they come back together.
Yes.
They make it. I just want to talk about Tom Bombadil.
Let's go back and talk about Tom Bombadil before we move on.
Okay, Tom Bombadil. Really interesting character. I'm really obsessed with characters that are often overlooked. Like, that's why I tend to,
Oh, that's like your whole life, right? You are that person.
Yeah. No, not exactly, but it was like, before I met you, it's like you had no friends and everyone overlooked you. And then I said, oh, look at this tiny little bedraggled girl with no future.
Sure. Was it a mirror that you were looking into?
Anyway, Morgan. Tom Bombadil. Okay, so he is the oldest being in Middle-earth. He calls himself eldest, and also like unborn or like born of none. And actually, when they are talking about what to do with the ring, at the council, you know, when the Fellowship is first together, Aristor, who's random elf lord who doesn't really matter, he talks about giving Tom Bombadil the ring because Tom Bombadil can totally, it won't affect him at all. So when they meet Tom Bombadil and his wife Goldberry, it's on the way to Bree. They've just survived attack by like this living, like ancient malevolent willow tree, and also a barrow wight, which is like a ghost essentially. And Tom Bombadil saves them like no problem. And he's this like enigmatic fairy tale character who wears like yellow pants and a blue jacket. I think it's real garish. I remember that. And his wife seems to be like maybe a dryad or like a spirit of a tree. And Tolkien never really explained who this character was, why he was so powerful, what he symbolized, except in one interview, he said that Tom Bombadil was like connected to the countryside around England that was being sort of slowly destroyed and turned into cities. And so maybe Tom Bombadil is like the spirit of the land.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's like a fallen deity kind of along the, same lines as Gandalf or Sauron. But I wish someone would figure out who the fuck this guy is because they just keep leaving him out of adaptations because they're like, who is this guy? I don't know. And maybe he's like the key to the whole thing.
Oh, he could be. That'd be an interesting take.
I don't know. Maybe. Okay. Do you have any thoughts on Tom Bombadil?
No, it's just fucking weirdo.
About him, didn't you? Everyone forgets Tom Bombadil.
He's just like Dre.
Who?
Everybody forgot about Dre. That was some Dr. Dre humor for you.
Yeah.
So there are definitely other things they changed about the adaptation, which is always essentially going to happen. But I feel like they were pretty true to the story, which was one of the most important things to Peter Jackson in the making of the movie, being true to them, using other people who either were historians, people who were already affiliated with the Lord of the Rings in some way or had a strong attachment with it. Everyone who worked on the film was very attached to it in one way or another. Christopher Lee, may he rest in peace, was notoriously a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Every year, I think of his life, he reread the trilogy.
Yep.
He knew Tolkien personally, went out of his way to meet him and be a part of his life, and originally had hopes to play Gandalf. He came to them and was like, listen, you're doing this and I'm going to play Gandalf. And while he is very intimidating and scary, and of course, why would they not cast him? They actually picked the perfect role for him, I think. I thought we could talk a little bit about the casting choices because I think they did such an excellent job with it, but there were famously some other ways that the casting could have gone. I wrote down some different characters that could be playing people we love today. I'll just go through these and then we'll talk about the cast that they did choose. Aragorn was originally supposed to be played by Stuart Townsend, who is a big fucking nobody.
Yeah, I don't know who. I know that name, but I don't know what that is.
Sean Connery was offered the role of Gandalf and turned it down because he didn't understand the script.
Thank God. He would have been horrible.
Patrick Stewart was then offered the role of Gandalf, which is interesting because he's best friends with Ian McKellen. Turned it down. Kate Winslet was originally offered the role of Éowyn because Peter Jackson had previously made this creepy fucking film with her called Heavenly Creatures, which is about children who murder people, like, ugh. And she was in it. And I think her deal was that she didn't want to do the time commitment because this movie came out on December 19th, 2001. So it was not long after her role in Titanic, where she was inundated with so much fame. And this was a franchise that would most notably bring her more fame, but also take a huge chunk of her life. And she famously, since Titanic, takes more low-key roles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's still amazing, but she doesn't try to go for like really huge Hollywood blockbusters.
She would have been perfect for that role.
She would be good. I think Miranda Otto is a good choice.
I love Miranda Otto. Yes, but I'm just saying Kate Winslet would have been good too.
David Bowie reached out with hopes to play Lord Elrond. Isn't that great? I mean, he was good in like Labyrinth, and he's all right, but no.
Yeah, he was so campy. I mean, I love him.
Yeah. Liam Neeson was pegged for Boromir, which would have been
Liam Neeson.
He would have been all right.
Yeah, he would have been interesting.
Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman were married during they're not anymore, but during the original casting, and were pegged to play Faramir and Éowyn. Wow. Which I think does not work at all. So I'm really glad that didn't happen. But that's just my opinion.
Ethan Hawke would have been interesting Faramir. I do not.
Uma Thurman, right?
Yeah,
she's not soft enough.
No.
Lucy Lawless was spoken about for Galadriel, which I think also would have not been good. She's not soft enough either. Yeah. Nicolas Cage turned down the role of Aragorn. I believe
they offered that shit to
Okay,
Nicolas Cage.
But let's get in the time machine and take ourselves back to 2001.
No.
Nicolas Cage was a huge action star in the early 2000s, the 90s.
He's the ugliest man in Hollywood.
I'm not saying he's a sexy Aragorn. I'm just saying he famously turned down the role. And then he also turned down the role of Neo. And his reason he gave, I read online, for turning down both of those roles is that he had family obligations. And may we all be better for him to not have taken either of those roles.
For him, though.
Right?
Jesus. And he's already a huge star.
He just fell into more crazy.
Yeah,
so those are people that could have been the cast of The Lord of the Rings. I think one of the strongest parts of the movie is that it could not have been cast more perfectly.
I totally agree. Yeah.
I will say the person I have the biggest beef with is Orlando Bloom as Legolas.
Girl, you know me too.
But at the time, I think you might know a thing or two that I was originally all right with Legolas.
Yeah, in fact, you had a life-size cardboard cutout in your bedroom.
Well.
And I seem to remember you actually kissing that cardboard cutout on the lips.
Did
multiple times.
Kiss him?
I'm pretty sure. We nothing.
We
nothing.
I guess we'll never know if there's truth to that story or not. Yes, I had a big crush on Legolas / Orlando Bloom, but as far as acting chops go, there could have been a better person. But honestly, I don't know who to put in that role. I've thought about it. Like, I don't know who to like cut him out with and like in place in his part. I don't know. Do you have anyone off the top of your head?
Well, it's so hard because when you think of Legolas, you think of that elf look, but so much of that is makeup and hair. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, you mentioned Ethan Hawke earlier. I think he could have been an interesting Legolas. I'm trying to think of what if they... Okay, it's not possible because he was too young, but what if Michael Cera had played Legolas?
He would have been like a literal baby. Oh,
yeah,
that would have been amazing.
Possible, yeah, I'm trying to get in the time machine and go back. I don't know, girl, but look, here's the thing. Legolas didn't have to be a character who didn't act at all and had no emotions.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because Arwen has plenty of emotions.
Yes.
Elrond, tons of emotions. The fact that Legolas is an emotionless character is all to do with Orlando Bloom.
Yes, I agree. Speaking of Arwen, she was, I believe, told originally when she was cast that she was too fat to play Arwen.
Shame.
And that Peter Jackson was very angry.
Good for you, Peter Jackson.
Yes. And so there was like a little controversy over that. Also, they tone her voice down because in real life she has a very, very high voice. And in the movie, she has a much lower voice. So I think it's a mix of her bringing her voice down a few octaves, but also a little post-production work to make her sound a little more ethereal.
Oh, I did not know that. Yeah, because her voice in the movie is like a raspberry cream girl.
Yes. A big part of The Lord of the Rings that we have not mentioned is the appendices. J.R. Tolkien wrote so much information, so much backstory, so much side stuff that he had to have little chunks at the end of every book called the appendices to kind of fill you in on other stuff, more background on families and characters. There's a lot of really beautiful stuff out there about Arwen and Aragorn, and a bunch of other stuff to just kind of fill you in. And Peter Jackson brilliantly made appendices to all of the movies, and our personal favorites that we together through high school and also individually throughout our life have watched a million times are the appendices for the Fellowship. They mostly cover the cast and bringing the cast together, and I think they're called like from page to production. I don't know, but it's all about like how they got the people together, like, and they became their own fellowship outside of the movie, and that they brought everything to life. And it is beautiful and amazing and hilarious and insightful.
If you think that for whatever reason the appendices would not be worth your time, you're wrong. They have as much rewatch value to me as the movies do.
Yes, they're so good. And you just kind of get like, because they lived together in New Zealand for 18 months or something, away from everyone else. I'm sure they have visitors, but they were their own family there, and they built these bonds. And especially the actors who played Merry and Pippin, which is so sweet that in real life they formed like a huge friendship. Dominic Monaghan is Merry and Billy Boyd is Pippin, and they just have like hilarious anecdotes. And one of my favorite things from the appendices is there's this moment where they have like a little camera, and it's Pippin and Merry and Frodo, so Elijah Wood and those guys, and they're sitting around and they do this thing where two of them are together. It's like, say, Billy Boyd and Merry or Dominic Monaghan, and they're talking shit about Elijah Wood, and they're like, fuck that guy, he's such like an idiot, he's always just like blah 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 blah, like trying to talk to us and always and everything. And then Elijah Wood walks up and they're like, hey, what's going on? And then like Billy Boyd walks away, and then Elijah Wood's like, fuck Billy Boyd. And then they just kind of take turns doing that, which is such an adorable way for them to pass the time, and also reminds me of us.
Yeah, 100%.
Just who we are.
Except when you leave the room and I start talking shit, I mean every word.
And when you leave the room, everything smells better. Another little anecdote from the appendices I will share. Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan have to put the Hobbit feet on, get the prosthetics. It's a big process. They wake up super early every morning to get that done. And
2 or 3 hour process, right?
It's so long. Wow. And there was this one anecdote they were talking about where they got it all together. They were done. They were like waiting to start filming. And Billy Boyd says to Dominic Monaghan, how fast do you think you can touch every table in this room? And they kind of just take turns timing each other, like going around touching all the tables. And then like one of their Hobbit's feet just like flies off. And then the producer or somebody comes over and is like, all right, we start in 5. And they're like, because timing is everything in the movies, and I'm sure they got a lot of shade for that.
And it's such a stupid way to lose your costume. Like, how many times do you think you can touch all these tables? Really?
Yeah.
Girl,
it's adorable, though.
Take several seats.
Another interesting thing you learn in the movie appendices that Sean Bean does not fly, does not care for flying, and would refuse to fly in the helicopter to get up on the mountains for filming. And so he would leave several hours early every day and walk. And then they would fly over in the helicopter and be like, there he is. So yeah, if you haven't read the appendices and you're a fan of the book, you need to do that. And if you are a fan of the movie and have not watched the appendices, you need to do that.
100%.
So obviously we're fans of The Lord of the Rings.
Can you tell?
I pulled the ratings for the movie and the ratings for the book, which I think you did as well. So on Rotten Tomatoes, the movie got a 91%, which is 8.2 out of 10 on average, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good for the first movie. I think I agree with that. To me, it's a bit of a slow starter. So
on Goodreads, the book got 4.33 out of 5 stars. So it's kind of almost exactly the same, which is interesting.
You know what's interesting about that, though, as far as like the Goodreads score? So I was thinking about, Fellowship of the Ring is your favorite movie.
Yes.
Right? And I know you like the book quite a lot. I literally have only read Fellowship of the Ring 2 or 3 times in my life, which is like, I've read like Two Towers like maybe 15 times.
Yes.
Right? And so I was looking at the other sort of ratings for the books in the series. So Fellowship of the Ring, 4.3. Two Towers, 4.4. Return of the King, 4.5. But here's the kicker. Double the amount of people rated Fellowship of the Ring that rated either of the other two.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because some people start and then they don't finish.
It. Yeah. So I just thought that was interesting. Like, essentially, they're all good. It's a 0.1 difference between them each time.
Yeah.
But evidently, people found that Fellowship of the Ring was like, good, but I'm not going to continue on.
Well, to be fair, it is a little dense. And like, if you're not a huge fantasy reader, it's a lot to get through.
Oh, heck yeah.
That's what most people think, and we both think highly of it. Why don't I read you a couple second opinions on the movies that I found?
These people make me crazy.
I think you're going to like this. I will say, note, it was very few 1-star reviews on Amazon. Most of the 1-star reviews were like, this DVD ain't no good. It's scratched. Most of the things that they didn't like were not the movie's fault. But let me just read you a couple that were. Should be titled Bored of the Rings. I've read a lot of reviews written here and must believe that all the people who wrote favorable reviews have not read J.R.R. Tolkien's books. The movie was extremely boring. What else can I say? If you haven't read the trilogy plus The Hobbit, I suggest you take your money and buy the books and forget about this movie.
Hateful. Book nerds.
Overrated. This movie seemed promising for maybe the first half. Then it was boring, and finally ended with little or no resolution. I understand there are 2 other movies, but seriously, after this one, no way. Also, helpful dating tip, not a chick flick.
Fair enough.
It's not a chick flick. That's true.
That's fair enough, yeah.
But what a waste of life. I knew what I was getting into, rented it for my friend, dear Lord of the Rings geeks. Please forgive me, but what a waste of life.
They're rotted and they're gutted and they don't know good cinema when they see it.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to die. This movie was the worst. I love Harry Potter, Star Wars, etc., but this movie, I just couldn't get into it. I bought the digital copy to watch while I was flying to Seattle. If I would have had a parachute, I would have just jumped out of the emergency exit to get away from this.
What? If you like all those other series, how could you hate Lord? What was it about Lord of the Rings that made you hate it? Was it the hairy feet? Because I also am disturbed by the hairy feet.
I can't say. 1 star. Don't like it. Didn't watch but the first 15 minutes. Okay, and then I discovered there was another feature on Amazon where you can comment on someone else's comments. And this amazing viewer, Mr. Voorhees, had a little bit of something to say about that. He says, fair enough. I didn't like the way your review started, so I stopped after 3 words. Which I thought was some shade that I super appreciated.
But that's also a lie, right? Because he says, the original viewer says more than 3 words in that they stopped after 3.
Okay, he probably read the whole review. He read the whole thing.
You can't trust anyone.
But it's the shade that matters.
That was deep shade. Deep shade. Well, I'm glad you couldn't find lots of reviews that were 1 star because...
Me too.
And all those reviews, I hate those people. They obviously have no taste.
But also props to Lord of the Rings because that's just funny.
Yeah, that's pretty hilarious, yeah. If I'd had a parachute. Okay, so, Morgie, I thought we might play a little gamey game. Now, like last week, this is a game that I have made up. It has never existed before today.
Oh, okay.
And I call it, since we're talking about Lord of the Rings, I call it Marry, Fucking Kill. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I made this up. Yes.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Are you preparation H for this?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, I want you to imagine 3 people in front of you. Okay? Gandalf the White. Gimli.
Oh.
I know. Or Smeagol.
Oh, this is hard.
I know.
I have to marry one. I have to fuck one. And I have to kill one?
Yes. Yes. And you can't, passies.
Okay. I'm gonna kill Smeagol. Or / Gollum. Whichever one. I can't remember what you said. But fuck him.
Smeagol. Yeah.
The
sweeter one.
I'm going to... fuck Gandalf.
Interesting.
Because I think he could bring it. There might be some magic in there. And then I'm going to marry Gimli because I think I could weasel my way into being royalty.
That makes sense. And also, he wouldn't mind your beard.
And yep. And the dwarves, they love the diamonds and the gemstones. And you know I love gemstones.
They do.
Okay.
Okay, lovely. Okay, you ready for another?
Yes.
Okay, don't fuck this up, okay? Marry, fuck, kill. Mary, Pippin, Sam.
Mary, Pippin, Sam. Well, I'm going to kill Sam because he's boring.
Amen.
I'm going to fuck Pippin because he's sweet, and I think he would like it.
And because you've always wanted to fuck him.
And I'm going to marry Mary because he seems like the best partner for adventures.
Ooh, okay. That was a good one. You answered that really well. That's totally how I would also do it.
Yeah.
Pippin's the most fuckable of the three.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last one. Are you ready?
Yes.
I think this might be the hardest.
Oh, God.
Okay. Marry, fuck, kill. Shelob the spider. The Balrog. And Radagast the Brown.
Oh my God, he's so crazy. Well, first of all, I'm gonna kill that spider because I can't be being with him ever in any way, forever.
Shelob has 8 legs.
Fuck Shelob.
Unending pleasure.
No. Have you seen that like giant dagger thing that she drops out? I don't want to be near it. I don't want it inside of me. None of it.
Frodo looked pretty satisfied, I thought.
Well, he did foam at the mouth. Okay, so that leaves me with the Balrog and Radagast the Brown, who is legit Chris Balls.
It has birch in his hair, yeah.
He's got like a little nest up top. Oh my God. Okay, well, okay, here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna fuck the Balrog. Because, first of all, he's probably a freak in the sheets.
I bet so. All that fire and, ooh, girl.
Oh, and second of all, there is no way I am living in darkness for the rest of my life.
You can't look at yourself,
No.
girl.
I can't do it. But Radagast the Brown, okay, so, like, a lot of people don't have sex with their husbands.
Yeah.
So, like, I can definitely live that existence. And then also, if I marry him, I get to, like, live in nature. Granted, in a crazy fucking person's house in the middle of, like, bird shit town nature. But I get to take walks in the woods every day and journal my feelings on the inside of bark and have sex with random wanderers.
You know what? I think you answer that as well as you possibly could because Radagast is also a healer, and after that Balrog,
I'm gonna need
you, girl. You're gonna be. Did you watch Coven? American Horror Story Coven?
I did not.
Oh shit, girl. Well, we'll cut that.
Okay. So yes, that was great. I love that game.
Thank you. I was really impressed with you.
So we have mentioned several times that Lord of the Rings is very heavy in current pop culture and just in general. It's out there. I thought you might be really interested in this amazing story I came across of Lord of the Rings and current pop culture. I'm going to just read you the title of this article.
Hit me.
Grandma accidentally prays to Elrond from Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Yeah. So a Brazilian grandmother has been praying to the figurine of Lord Elrond for years without realizing it. This woman has confused this tiny figurine of Lord Elrond with Saint Anthony because Saint Anthony is often pictured in floral robes with leaves and vines. And Lord knows where she found this little statue of Lord Elrond. But her granddaughter or her great-granddaughter came to her house and saw him on his little pedestal in all of his glory. And she was like, Grandma, what with this? She's like, what are you doing? And Grandma calmly explains to her that it's St. Anthony. And her great-granddaughter had to point out to her that he is wearing a crown and also has pointy ears. And on the bottom side of it says the Lord of the Rings. So this is just the sweetest little thing that could ever have happened.
So I wonder if sweet little grandma now is certain she's going to hell.
Yes.
Like, did she start like beating her breast and like tears streaming down her face?
Or has she completely restructured her religion and she actually now worships Lord Elrond? Because perhaps he answered all of her prayers in the past few years.
If you were going to worship one character from Lord of the Rings, which character would you worship?
Ooh, I might have to go with Galadriel because she is a beast, and also just she has that air of just goddess written all over her, and because I think she could like legit answer some of my prayers.
Yeah. Oh, she's so powerful.
Yeah.
Ooh, I really don't know. I stumped myself.
Oh, no.
I stumped myself.
You fucked it up.
Oh, God. Galadriel was definitely my first thought. But you know what? What about Saruman before he became evil? Like hundreds of years ago? I have a feeling that he would be someone I would worship. Like before he became Saruman of many colors and was just like Saruman the White, like leader of the order.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could see him being a pretty legit guy before he fell. I think I worship him.
Before we wrap up our Lord of the Rings discussion, I had one little game I wanted to play. I thought we could go through and sort the 9 members of the Fellowship into Hogwarts houses.
Oh my God, I'm so ready for this.
All right, let me take you through it. Frodo Baggins.
Frodo Baggins is definitely a Gryffindor.
That's what I wrote down. He's definitely a Gryffindor.
Yeah, loyal.
Samwise Gamgee.
Hufflepuff.
I wrote down Hufflepuff. He is, because he's loyal. And he's kind, and he's soft, and he's gentle. Gandalf the Grey.
So I'm being pulled between Ravenclaw and Gryffindor, but I think I'm going to go with Gryffindor.
He's a Gryffindor.
A Gryffindor!
Yeah, I agree. He's tough, but he would definitely go to one of those. Legolas.
You know, actually, I would think maybe he's a Slytherin because his dad's a dick.
Yes, definitely. I can get on board. I wrote down Ravenclaw, but he's really more of a Slitherclaw for sure. Because he knows he's smart and he wants you to know it, and also he's a dick.
Yeah, he's totally a dick.
What about Gimli, son of Gloin?
Oh, sweet Gimli. I don't know. He's kind of a what's a Slytherin and a Gryffindor together? A Sliffindor.
Yeah. I wrote down that Gimli works in Hogsmeade.
You shady bitch. Poor Gimli. Yeah, I'm with you though, girl. You're right. Hagrid one of them.
What about Aragorn?
I mean, I think the obvious choice is Gryffindor, but I'm actually going to think maybe Ravenclaw because he is super intelligent.
He is, but to me, he seems like kind of the reincarnation of Godric Gryffindor. Like, if anyone could pull a sword out of a fucking hat, besides Harry Potter, I think it's Aragorn, but I hear you. I hear you.
I haven't put anyone in Ravenclaw yet either. I feel bad.
Boromir.
Slytherin.
I wrote down Boromir never got a letter.
Oh, yeah, he's a muggle. Yeah,
he's such a fucking muggle.
Denethor would not allow that shit. No doubt.
But Faramir got a letter for sure.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
And he's in Ravenclaw, I would say.
Oh, he's definitely in Ravenclaw. Oh, I love Faramir.
Meriadoc Brandybuck.
I'm going to say Hufflepuff.
I said Hufflepuff,
Did
too.
You?
And the final one, Peregrine Took.
I think that old Pippin, he's curious. Ravenclaw.
Interesting that you would choose for him to live away from Mary.
Well, they can still be biffers.
So the way I think of them is I put them both in Hufflepuff because I felt like Mary is super a Hufflepuff and that he would need Pippin to be there, so Pippin would ask to be there.
That's so smart.
But you're right. Pippin's he's a little more curious, which would put him in Ravenclaw. But also, wouldn't they just be Fred and George Weasley?
They would totally be.
They're just Fred and George Weasley, 100%.
Good job, Rowling. Wow.
Winning.
That was fun. I like that.
Yeah. So we talked all of this about the Lord of the Rings. Find more information about the Lord of the Rings online. Visit New Zealand if you're super fucking rich and you want to actually go to Middle Earth.
Girl, take me if you're really super fucking rich.
That's like legit on my bucket list.
Yeah,
like,
mine too.
Totally gonna make that happen.
And if you're an older gay man and you would be interested in having a young, attractive gay man go with you to New Zealand, I'm not promising sexual favors, except maybe a hand jibber. I will definitely go. I will talk to you. I will laugh at you.
Yeah. Or if you want good company, just give me a call. So if you do want to read the books, make sure you check out the appendices and tell us what you think. If you haven't read or seen the movie, we recommend it.
And let us know if we misspoke about anything. We really do know this shit through and through, but then again,
we're always accepting corrections.
Yes, always.
All right. Did you happen to put together another little game we like, Two Truths and a Lie?
Oh, that game I made up for the first time last week?
Yeah, that brand new game.
Yes. I do have two truths and maybe a lie.
Ooh, tell me about it.
Okay. So these are, and you inspired me to do this. These are sort of ways that I have interacted with Lord of the Rings. Okay. True or not true? I once wrote a short story about the two lost blue wizards. You know, the two blue wizards who go south of Gondor?
Okay.
Yeah, true or not true? Okay. True or not true? I read the entire series when I was 11 years old. True or not true? I once had a sex dream involving both Aragorn and Legolas and Sam.
Oh God. Which one is not true? Okay, I'm gonna say the first one is false.
So you think that I did not, in fact, write a short story about the two lost blue wizards?
I mean the second one.
You don't even know me, Morgan.
You didn't.
You don't even know.
You weren't 11. You were 70.
No, I did read the series. Well, I started when I was 11. I may have been 12 by the time I finished. And I did once write a short story about the two lost blue wizards.
You didn't have that sex dream?
I did not have that. No. I don't think I've ever had a sex dream about Lord of the Rings characters.
Oh, interesting.
Shocking. Okay, now, do you have some lies?
Oh, I have prepared some information for you. When I was 16, the only gift I asked for from my family was a decorative red leather-bound copy of The Lord of the Rings.
Okay, possibly true.
I never read The Hobbit until after I read The Lord of the Rings.
That's my number one possibility right now.
In high school, I let you borrow my entire DVD box set of The Lord of the Rings, which you returned to me with the top corner of the two towers bent down, and I murdered you with fiery daggers in my eyes. Which one? Which one's not true, Mick?
Oh my goodness. I don't remember that, so I don't know if that's true.
Oh,
you seem to be,
okay.
It seems like I feel maybe you literally just started menstruating. Something just happened across the table for me. Let's see. Well, I'm thinking that the second one is false. You did not read The Hobbit after reading Lord of the Rings. Is that right guess?
That is the right guess.
Yes!
I read The Hobbit before I read The Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
If that wording was weird, that's what I meant.
Okay.
I read The Hobbit first. And then, to further tell you, hit with you a little truth, I never read The Lord of the Rings until after the movies started coming out.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I prefer the movies to the books. Don't tell nobody.
Yeah. You just told everyone, but it's fine. I'll keep your secret.
I'm so sorry, Morgan, that I returned something to you bent.
You should be.
I figured you would want possessions that are bent, like you.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Like your dick. I wanted to just also talk about what's happening in our general lives. What's making us happy? What makes us sad?
Oh, girl, I am happy, and I am sad.
Oh, tell me.
Well, I am happy because I feel like, I'm a lover of solitude. I know you know this about me.
You are.
You might call me a hermit or a freakish outcast weirdo.
Both.
Yes. And we are living in a world today where it is totally not at all difficult to live a life by yourself. Not all the time. I'm not saying 100%, but you can do everything online.
Yeah.
You can fucking figure out any question you might have between Google and YouTube. Other people face to face are not as necessary as they once were, right?
Sure.
On the other hand, I'm also sad. Actually about that exact same thing, because it just makes me sad, when you go to the grocery store or Walmart or something similar, not that I would ever go to Walmart, but some people do, and you see all the cashiers waiting for people to come in their line, but everyone's in the automatic checkout, and it's why?
Yeah.
Because they really don't want to make eye contact for a minute and a half, right? It just there's something about that is so sad to me. And even though I am that person often, I don't always think that's a good thing. And I think if left unchecked, all of that solitude is going to make us a horrible broken human.
Oh, you're going to turn into Shelob.
I'm going to get you with all my legs and my stinger. Yes, queen.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Well, I'm also really happy right now.
Oh, what are you happy about?
I'm really happy that yesterday, January 21st, millions of people around the world came together to march against oppression and march for love and equality and equal rights for everyone. And that there were so many allies marching with women at the Women's March, literally across the world. They had signs, they had rainbow flags, and here in Texas, we had Wendy Davis, and she came to preach. And I had so many chills listening to all of the speakers come, being there there with my friends, men and women that I love, seeing people there with their children with signs that said feminist in training. And some of my favorite signs were on babies where they said things like, I like to nap, but I stay woke. And I think that is so beautiful that I got to be a part of that yesterday. And I'm so happy to have done that and to just share love. But you know what makes me sad?
Oh, what makes you sad, baby?
I'm sad that equality and women's rights and LGBT rights and racism are still things that we have to fight for, and that we have a piece of shit person that is going to try to dictate what's okay and what's not okay. And we're just going to have to stand together for that.
I totally feel you, Morgie. I'm so proud of you for going to those marches yesterday.
Yeah.
I was working all day long, and to be perfectly honest, it wasn't until I got off of work and got to see the pictures of the hundreds of thousands of people across the country who were marching. It was like 250,000 people in LA or something.
Probably.
It was like 50,000 people here in Austin.
Yeah, which for Texas, a state that runs very red.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It's huge. It was so powerful to see those pictures. I'm so proud of you for marching, and thank you for that. Yes, you're welcome.
One of my favorite pictures I saw was from an international march in London, a picture of Sir Ian McKellen himself.
I saw that.
His sign was just a picture of his biffer, Patrick Stewart, one of his famous Star Trek photos where he's putting his head down into his hands. Just beautiful. Yeah. Very poetic.
So cute. And he was wearing a long, fabulous scarf, too.
Oh, so fabulous. Always. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at BNBcast. You can follow me personally at Morgandolph.
And you can follow me on Facebook at Mick Parker.
And if you guys want to write to us, if you have any corrections or just other general things you want to send, you can send that to beautyandthebee@gmail.com and find our blog while you're at it. We are on bnbcast.wordpress.com.
Yes, and we've been updating pretty regularly. So if you want to hear more of our voices in the written form, that's a good place to check it out. And Morgie, we have a Facebook podcast page.
We have a Facebook page. I believe you can just search B&B Cast and you'll be able to find it, or Beauty and the Bitch.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Morgie, I had so much fun talking to you today.
I did too.
I love you so much.
I want to just leave you guys with a couple of plugs for things that I recommend you check out. I once went to Governor School, which is essentially a summer camp with a bunch of lovely people, but specifically a girl named Corey, and she is trying to make it in film and comedy, and she's fantastic and amazing. She has a YouTube channel. The little show she does is called Corey and Ryan in a Car. You look for them on YouTube. They also get featured on Funny or Die, if you're familiar with that. It is hilarious. It is just her and her friend essentially being boyfriend and girlfriend driving around in a car and just the different things that happen between them. And it's only a couple minutes long and it will brighten your day.
Aw, Corey, good for her.
Yeah. Locally, I'd like to plug Cap City Comedy Club because of what's going on in the world right now. I think we could all use a little more comedy in our lives. So if you're in ATX, check out Cap City Comedy Club.
It's good for you to be able to laugh, Morgan, because, for you, it's either laugh or cry, right? You look in the mirror, you've got two choices, bitch.
Oh, I see.
You thought it was going to be political and deep. No, I chose to be shallow and cruel.
Obviously.
Speaking of shallow and cruel, I would like to plug a show that has been on forever, and I know I'm behind the times, but Shameless just recently came onto Netflix. And I, being a loser fantasy nerd who spends all of his time in trashy fantasy books, I thought that it was a new show. And I was like, ooh, 6 seasons. I watched them all, and I have to tell you, if you are someone who is from a lower economic status, you grew up poor, if you're a person who feels like you try and fail a lot, or if you're the kind of person who has a dysfunctional family, what were you going to say? Something shady, Morgan?
I was just going to say all millennials.
Yeah, that's true. Essentially, yes, any millennial, anyone who's ever met Morgan and been touched by the virus of fail.
I got it from you.
Oh, hurtful. This show is phenomenal. It is funny, but it is also touching, and it is real. I felt like it was very real.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. So I would say check out Shameless, girl. It's on Netflix. I think they are on season 8 now. So season 7's lost in the ether, but it'll arrive soon enough.
Great. And here's what we're going to talk about next time on the show. The Flash.
Ooh, Morgie, I'm so excited. You know, this is my personal favorite superhero TV show.
Yes.
Yours as well?
Yes. This is the one show that we agree on 100%. There are a lot of superhero TV shows out there right now, especially on the CW.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there are 4 just on the CW.
And Mickey watches most of them. This is the only one that I watch religiously, so we are in agreement.
It is super high quality. And, you know, if you're the kind of person who maybe isn't that into superheroes or maybe always thought The Flash was lame, which I'll be totally transparent with you, he was never one of my favorite superheroes. The first 2 seasons, I do believe, are on Netflix right now. And it will pull you in immediately. The acting is top notch. And we're going to have a lot of fun talking about it.
Yes. So we look forward to that next time. Thanks for tuning in, you guys.
Bye, baby.
Bye-bye.
Bye.